Hey, welcome to the Recovery Chapel podcast. My name is Ray, and I am your recovery pastor for today. This is great to be in studio. Of course, I have my trusty co-host with me. Kendra, how's it going?
Good morning. It's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm great. Always good to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a couple of days.
I know. Life's been busy. I've been studying long hours.
Long hours. It's like all night long last night.
It was all night long. Lifespan development for my psych classes.
I am so glad I'm already knowledgeable and don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. All right.
There's another one.
Yeah, that book I read too. Again, interesting facts. So, Todd is in the studio today. We're excited to have Todd with us.
Thank you guys for asking.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure to have you in studio. You just celebrated a birthday. We want to shout out to that real quick.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
3 years.
3 years. Somebody asked me, what does 3 years feel like, being 3 years old? And my comment was the same as 2 years. My day-to-day doesn't change. It's always the same. I don't have the ups and downs of brown birthdays. Oh, I'm getting squirrely because I'm getting ready to pick up a chip or have another anniversary. It's the same thing.
Still one day at a time.
I do everything the same every day, so it doesn't change. It does not change. And that's where this consistency has come in my life now.
And that's something that you have today that you didn't have before, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a wreck. Just up and down emotionally. The way I handled everything in my life was just a train wreck. And today it's just totally different.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how you got brought into recovery?
I had it was interesting enough. The California Department of Highway Patrol decided that I didn't drive really well.
What?
So through a few DUIs, because it's more than two, that'd be a couple, and I don't know what we call four, so I had 4 DUIs in like 18 months. So I had an ex-girlfriend that said that, I think maybe you should try this AA thing. So she agreed to go to my first AA meeting with me over on the coast, and it was on a Wednesday at noon. And that is not my sobriety date, by the way. I tried it multiple times after that. But I went in and I'm like, I don't want to go because of the fact I'm going to know somebody. She says, what are the chances you're going to know somebody here? And I walk into a room with 30 or 40 people, and I knew 90% of them. So much for that. So then just through the wreckage of what I do and how I just make everything a mess, I never called myself homeless because I always had a couch somewhere, and Mom never says no. So you always show up at Mom's house, but I end up here in town, and on a train coming in at 10:30 at night with nothing, just my backpack basically, and what stuff I had already brought to my mom's house. And this is after I got pulled over and the truck got impounded for me driving without a license. I wasn't even drunk at that moment. Well, or they were just they're being nice to me, one of the two. I'm not sure.
Tell me how you were actually feeling when you came in on that train.
So I had my last drink in Hanford. When I switched, there was a grocery outlet there, and I went and bought a bottle of wine and poured it in my cup because it fits in this cup that's sitting right here. Actually, kind of funny enough, it fits in this cup. And so when I came in, I was defeated, but I still thought I had the solution. I thought I had a solution. I was lucky enough that by going to that first meeting and knowing where to go and all my relapsing, I knew where to go and stuff. So I'd come in and I had met a gentleman in town in Bakersfield here, and he's my current sponsor today. And he'd give me his number. He wasn't my sponsor at the time, but he'd give me his number, and I called him to pick me up. At 10:39, he was there. He showed up. And that's because that's what we do.
And that's what I was going to say. That's a perfect example of how this works.
Yeah, that's what we do. You don't ever request a request in the recovery community. You don't say no to it. I mean, if sometimes you have to because of other things, but you don't say no to those things. You do what you have to do. Lives depend on it. And so he showed up there and picked me up, and that was the start of this journey that I had. And in a short time after that, he became my sponsor.
How did you come to meet him before? You said that you had known people here in the community.
Just through meetings. I went to a meeting and he spoke. It's kind of funny you say that because I shared on it last night. An ex-problem drinker can win the confidence of an alcoholic in short time. And I know I'm mutilating the quote out of the Blue Book. Hope I can say that. Out of the Blue Book. But no, I'm mutilating. But that's basically what it is. He said something, and I went, wow, dude gets me. Dude, how does he know my story?
Directly to your heart.
Yeah, how does he know what my head thinks? How does he know how my mind processes? And in that, I had been taught enough and heard enough about this sponsor thing, and I had tried having a sponsor before. I just did what he told. I told him I did what he told me to do, but I just did what I wanted to do.
So you did what you were willing to do at that point in time.
I don't even know if I'd say willing to do. I just you get desperation involved and you'll do anything. So he wanted me to do it this way, and I decided that I had a better way. So there's the willing thing. I wasn't willing to do the way he said it, but I was willing to say, okay, you want me to do this? Well, I'm going to do it my way because my way's better than yours because I know better than you, which I didn't know my head from my butt at that time.
Tell me how that worked out for you.
Yeah, I relapsed multiple times. But I did like I said, I said it last night, I did my steps in like 2 days. I did all 12 of them in like 2 days by myself. I stayed sober for like 5 days. You know, but that's what happens. So I'm coming to meetings. This gentleman speaks to me. He speaks directly in my head. He knows exactly what my thoughts are, and I'm like, and he was just hard enough. And I heard a little bit of his story. I'm like, dude is way more screwed up than I am. So I need this guy to sponsor me. I didn't realize at that moment when he came up to me and introduced himself, and I asked him to sponsor me, and he said he'd be honored. I did not realize the road that we were getting ready to get on. I didn't realize that
trudging.
Trudging. Yeah, trudging's a good word. I didn't realize how much he was gonna pull out of me, because I still had in my mind, this dude's good for me because I can't BS him, but I'm still gonna do it my way. Well, the conversation became with him one day is like, so here's the deal. Do you want to, and I'm going to take the language out of this conversation because of what we're on, but he says, do you want to self-sponsor? Do you want me to sponsor you? Because right now you're self-sponsor. If you want to self-sponsor, go ahead. That's fine. I'm going to go find somebody that wants this. And there was a few F words and S's and stuff in that whole conversation. But at that moment when he said that, I was like, wow.
He was someone that you needed, someone to be direct and to call you on your BS.
Right, and that's exactly what it was. And to this day, he'll call me on it. And within that, I have a lineage within my sponsorship that will call me on my BS. I have relationships with people that are in my lineage and even out of my lineage, for that matter, that'll call me on my BS. Have stuff even as simple of, we have character defects. We find these character defects and we ask them to be removed. They come back in a totally different way. Same character defect, manifesting itself differently. I had that happen to me a year and a half into recovery, been through my steps, and they thought all my defects were gone at the moment.
Doesn't work that way.
And then I had a dear person in my life that I love her to death, and she called me on one of my defects of something that I did that didn't. It was the same defect. It was just totally different. And she called me on it, and then in turn, I was able to. I didn't have to. I was able to make amends, and we're just like normal. We're back to what we were.
Would you mind elaborating on what that character defect, not necessarily what the situation was, but that character defect is, so that those who are listening can have an understanding of maybe what a character defect look like? Do
you know how to spell God?
Yeah.
It's Todd. It's Todd. That's what I used to say, because that's a character defect. My life drives off of fear, but those character defects is I don't want to be alone, but I want to be in control. Uh-huh. So that was very much my control thing, and it was a control thing of a situation of theirs that I knew the parties involved, and I was trying to control it, and I was saying some things to both parties that were in a controlling manner.
And when we look at that, that's like us definitely not staying on our side of the
Oh,
street.
I'm out of my lane. I am really good at getting out of my lane. We actually have a joke about it in cars nowadays. The steering wheels vibrate when you start getting out of your lane. That my steering wheel vibrates a lot. And what's happened today versus even a year ago, when that steering wheel vibrates, my mouth shuts.
That's good.
Versus before, my mouth would open. And it still does. It's not perfection at all. But it doesn't go like it used to.
And you have like these little triggers that let you know now, right? That like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Ooh, you said trigger. We're not going to discuss the word trigger.
Okay.
I wouldn't call them triggers. I have cautions, caution
Okay.
signs. They're cautions to me, because trigger's an excuse. I'll say it. Trigger's an excuse in my book. If we trigger, it's an excuse. It's an excuse to do an action that we shouldn't do. So I'm cautioned. I still do those actions still sometimes, but nothing triggered me because nothing triggered me to drink.
Everything triggered me to drink. I don't know what you're talking about.
I
used life as a trigger.
Well, the reason why I drank was because I was happy, I was sad,
Everything.
good, bad, everything. So, but I would, if somebody would shut the door too hard, I would drink. That's not true. That was just an excuse. I was wanting to drink, so I use it as an excuse because that door shut too hard. That's what I mean by that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I
So
appreciate it.
it's just a tough one for me. But yeah. So in that situation with this person, like I said, that control thing came up again, and it's because I didn't want either one of these people hurt because they both were dear to me, but I was trying to control that. I was playing God again, and that doesn't work well. I don't do that well. I am not Bruce Almighty. And if you've seen the movie, he did it horribly too, because I have a higher power. My God controls everything in my life today, and I have to let Him control it. Because when I don't, it goes screwy fast.
Yeah, you mentioned God, so I'm going to interject. We have a goal, I guess you could call it, a want, a willingness to seek a contact with our higher power, right? A continuous contact with that higher power. What does that look like for you? How do you stay connected to your higher power?
So for me to stay connected, it's first thing in the morning, hit my knees. First thing, that's how I start my days. I have to. I hit my knees. I make the bed, because if you don't make your bed every morning, you're going to drink. So if you don't know that, people, that happens.
I love that.
I've seen it happen, but just kidding. But it is a good habit to have. There's actually a really good thing on YouTube that Navy Admiral talked about it. But I hit my knees and pray, and I have to give it over. I give that rope over every morning. Thy will be done. My will sucks. Your will's way better. My life goes better when you're controlling it. I will walk out the door and start to take it back. My will, it's this rope, and I chase that rope, and I'll grab that rope and everything else, and then I'll have to get just enough pain going on and go like, what the heck am I doing? Why am I grabbing this rope again? Why am I pulling it? Why am I trying to take control back? I've proven over and over again that when I'm in control and my will's done, it's screwed up. So that I'm able to go back to prayer and let it go again.
And so that's the conscience, right? That's your conscience contact. Yeah. And I use the word continuous because that's the start. It has to be continuous, because it's easy to, and I've found myself doing this quite a bit. You mentioned control a minute ago, and you mentioned taking control and trying to steer, right? And we're trying to steer. We're trying to stay in our lane. Yet I'm just veering towards those lines. And boop, 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 boop. But the fact of the matter is that if it's continuous, if you're continuously remembering that prayer, that time on your knees in the morning, at 10 o'clock, at 11, 11:15, and maybe not even that often, but sometimes that often, because life continues, right? It's just how we deal with life that makes a huge difference. How do we deal with life on life's terms? Because you can't change the world around you. It's situational, right?
Yeah.
This is a situation beyond my control. All right, cool. Well, you're watching a train wreck. good thing you're not on the train.
Right.
And so that's that contact with God, that continuous contact with God, going, you know what? Thank you. I'm so grateful I'm not on that train. And then I have tools, principles, traditions, and concepts to deal with those situations. Yeah. So that's really cool that you mentioned that. Let's talk a little bit about, real quick, we're getting into Todd's life here, digging a little deeper. Let's talk about family, man. What's going on with the family life?
So I it's interesting you bring that up, and that just 2 weeks ago, I was without a driver's license I was driving. I was not driving for about.
We're on the air, bro.
I know, for about 3 years. I was not driving for about 3 years. I mean, reality.
Yeah.
So when I'd go see my children because they're not in town, it was an arrangement with my ex-wife. She'd have to drop them off to me. It would be like at the park in Paso Robles. I guess I say that in Paso Robles, and I'd have time with them, but they weren't staying the night with me. And for me to go see them, it was a drive that takes an hour and a half is a 4 or 5 hour ordeal to ride the train, to catch a bus, to go there. I'm blessed with a person in Paso Robles that is like a mother to me, and I stay at her house, and then she helps me as much as possible. But just a couple weeks back, I was able to actually pick my children up from my ex-wife's house. It used to be our house. From her house, and have these go in the house. I mean, I haven't been in the house in 3 years, and to go in and have a conversation with her, sit on the couch. That is kind of interesting with the memory side of things, because it's the same couch that we bought. Everything. It's like time hadn't changed, nothing, other than there was a few more knick-knacky things in the house, but that hasn't changed. But I was able to pick my children up. I was to keep them overnight. I went out to the coast and had received my sponsor happened to be over there on the coast on vacation, and he sent me a picture of a landmark in Morro Bay, and I sent him the same from his hotel room. And I sent him the same picture as I was driving in. He's like, "Are you here?" He's like, "Yes, I'll see you in 10 minutes." And we met up. So I was sitting there 3 years into recovery. I'm sitting there or almost 3 years. I'm sitting there with my children and my sponsor, these really, really important people in my life. And I was like, this is what it's about. This is the promises. I went through a lot of times of like, these promises aren't coming fast enough. I see people get into recovery and they get everything back in 6 months. And I'm sitting there going like, why haven't I got it back yet? I should. I have a year and a half sobriety. Somebody said this. I have a year and a half sobriety. Why don't I have all my things back? Or I have a year sobriety. Why don't I have all this stuff back? I should have this back. And the statement goes, have you ever been a year sober? How am I to judge where I'm at in my recovery, what I should have and shouldn't have? Because I've never been there, me personally. I'm looking at what other people have.
You mean that's part of our self-control, but you mean there's no timeline? Like, at this point you'll have this, and at this point you'll have that.
Right. There's no roadmap to that, and that's hard for me, because it goes back to I live a very linear life. A, B. 1 + 1 is 2.
Yes and no.
It's black and white, red, white. Yeah, there's no maybes. I don't live in maybes. I live in very, very definites in my life, very linear. So it's hard. But I'm able to have this experience. When we're leaving, when we leave, I tell my sponsor, I love you. And my oldest son, he says, who is that guy? I said, well, it's my sponsor. He says, oh, thank you. I'm like, why? He says, well, because you told the man that you loved him. And because he doesn't, he's going like, wow. But he understands this whole sponsorship, that he understands this program, and it is not because of me.
Right. That's my favorite. That's my favorite story.
And it comes back from when I was probably a year sober at this point, maybe a little bit even more, so a year and a half. And I was seeing my youngest son, but I hadn't seen my oldest son yet. And he's 17 now, so he was 16 at the time. No, he was 15 at the time. And he wasn't ready, because he remembers everything. My children never saw me drunk, but they got the after effects of my drinking. Not showing up, not taking care of financial responsibilities, just the show that we don't, the things we don't do that we should. Well, as I'm doing all these things like I'm supposed to, my oldest son decides that he's going to spend the afternoon with me, and we were sitting in the park in Paso Robles, and he starts asking me questions, and like straight up big blue book question. Like, I'm like, what program have you been working, buddy? Are you an Al-Anon? Do I not know about this? I said Al-Anon, but do you not know about this? How do you know about this? And he says, where are you at in your step work? And I tell him what I'd been through all my steps, worked all my steps with my sponsor, and what I was doing. He says, well, so you're making amends? I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, do you have amends to make with me? I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, when are you planning on doing that? I said, well, when the time's right. And his comment to me was, I think now's good.
What a blessing. How did he know all of this?
So you count as a blessing. I went, oh, crap. Because I do this, and I usually have prayer before I make my amends and all these things that I didn't have at this point. So how he knew about this is there's a person in Pastoral Wolf's a teacher that had 25 years sober now. And she was my English teacher when I was in high school, but she was still drinking. And she ended up with my son in class, and she recognized the last name and asked him, says, are you by any chance Todd's son? He says, yeah. He said, where's your dad? And he says, oh, he's at the Salvation Army. He's in rehab. And she's like, well, so she started talking to him and explaining to him some program stuff, and was talking to him and asking about me, and he's telling her stuff. And she planted this seed of the way that nothing was his fault, that it wasn't malicious towards him or anything else. So let him be more accepting of me. It was interesting enough that night, that was on a Saturday, that night I went and watched that woman take a chip at a meeting, and I just able to go up to give her a hug and crying, just bawl my eyes out, and just a bumbling fool trying to explain to her, like, my kid, the whole thing. and then she says, yeah, Logan. I'm like, yeah. And so she just kind of paved this way. This is where we talk about carrying the message. That message isn't always to just another alcoholic. We carry the message to the alcoholic. It's our primary purpose. Help struggling people, love all God's children, help struggling people. But in that, there's families involved, and that's a perfect example of carrying our message to somebody that's not an alcoholic to help them with their alcoholic
friends and family.
There's a separate program for that to help with that stuff too, and that's huge, because I think the more education that people have, the more understanding people have, the easier it is. Because for me, if that conversation hadn't have happened between my son and her, I don't know where I'd be right now. There's people in my life I wish would still would have that conversation with somebody, that somebody would be willing to have that conversation so they can understand. I can tell them all day long. Simple as that. I can tell, look how good I am, look how great I am.
Same.
But I'm egotistical, so that goes bad usually. It has to be proof in the pudding. It has to be what I show and how I project. I may be the only person that somebody ever meets in recovery, and I may be the face of recovery to an individual.
And it's your responsibility to give that fruit out.
What do I want this another person to see of recovery? Do I want them to see the angry, like, to that point of like, why do I want what he has? Because he don't look that happy.
Right.
I want the joyous, happy, joyous, and free. That's what we're shooting for. Well, that's what I have today. I'm happy and joyous, free. Have moments, not perfect, but the way this head works, there's a lot of things I believe in life that a normal person it goes. And it's like, it happens. S happens. S with a bunch of squiggly marks happens. It was said on Forrest Gump. But that kind of that stuff. A normal person, it doesn't affect them. This alcoholic head, it screws it up. I have to work extra hard to keep this in that same of whatever, because I don't do whatever very well.
I don't think a lot of us do.
No,
that's an alcoholic mind. We don't handle that. We don't handle whatever. We don't let things just slide. It can't be. It didn't happen. No, you're gonna clean it now on my terms, because we want everything on our terms. That it's an interesting. That's such an interesting thing to have, is that we have a vision of what we think it should look like, And then what reality looks like, it talks about that. I'm the director.
You brought up earlier, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. You brought up earlier, it's kind of that pink cloud effect and how come this person's getting this, and this, and I don't have that. When I first came into the program, when I realized that I really had a problem and I knew I needed people, I couldn't do it by myself.
You came and played pool with us.
I came and I played pool. And you were, I think at the time, riding a scooter, and I know that's not exactly like where you wanted to be. Other people around you were getting this and getting that. But you had something, and from a personal point of view, you had something that these other people didn't have. You had, for the most part, you had that happy, joyous, free. You had that loving and caring, like, warrior aspect about you, and you stood strong in your sobriety, and you could tell it was an energy that you were able to give. And I don't think that you had really realized that before, that maybe you gained things in another aspect, whether it wasn't materialistic, you were gaining the fruits of the program and that relationship with your higher power, whom you call God. I just want to personally thank you for that welcoming, because if people aren't welcoming to the newcomer, it becomes so much more difficult.
It wasn't ideal. It was not ideal what I thought it should be or anything else. It was acceptance, a lot of it, and it was a humbling experience. It was humbling. If you ever want a very humbling experience, ride the city bus. And whatever city you're in, ride the bus. That is humbling. I did it. And I did it to go an hour across town to meet with sponsees for an hour to ride an hour back. So a meeting with a sponsee for me turned into a 3.5 hour ordeal. But I was also given direction. I was also told, this is what you need to do to have what you have right now, and what you have to continue doing this. I don't know where this line is. I don't have any idea where that line is of what's enough, what's not enough. I don't know. This is what I've done for this long. It goes back to the whole thing. What does 3 feel like compared to 2? I don't know. It feels the same because I haven't changed. I do the same thing every day. I do the same amount all the time. Is having 5 sponsees a magical number? Is having 2 sponsees a magical number?
There is no magical number.
I don't know what that number is. People always try to strive, and that's one thing. People try to strive for that. But where does that insanity happen again? I am not scared of alcohol in any way, shape, or form. The physical drink does not scare me. I can be around it. When I go over to the coast, I go to the bar I drank at because I know the owners really well. I sit at the bar stool that I sat in and drank at, and I have Coca-Cola out of a glass bottle. And a lot of times I'll put it in a short cup with a block of ice. And it'd look just like my cocktail would. But the alcohol doesn't scare me. And where my fear comes in is the insanity in my head. Because that insanity is the part that I have a hard time getting rid of. That's the part that I've had this whole program, this whole experience I've had, is to get rid of the insanity in my head. I have that subsided. It's still crazy. I just know how to. I have tools. We go back to tools. I have tools to keep it at bay, to keep it calm, and to keep it going in a good direction. On a positive direction versus a negative direction. When something negative happens in my life, I look for the positive. I used to always say I was the glass half full person. Man, I'm all about the glass being half full. Hell no, I was about the glass being half empty my whole life. And even if it was half empty, in that half mark, to me, in my mind, it was a quarter. And I was going to lose.
It's time to fill it up again.
I was going to lose everything. Everything was that. See, today, it's not that way. It's like, it happens. I'm off work right now because of COVID, and it was because somebody had tested positive at my workplace. I didn't know if I was going to be getting paid this week. I've been off all week long. I tested. I came back negative. No big deal. Negative for COVID. Yes, I don't have it. I do not have it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Do not have it. But I didn't know what was going to happen. Because before I'd be freaking out. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to pay for that? How am I going to pay for that? And this time I'm like, if I don't get paid for a week, I don't get paid for a week. Whatever. I'm provided for. I'm always provided for. And that has nothing to do with me. And I know it has nothing to do with me because this godly this earth person, or this person on earth, can't control that much. You know, I get the biblical side of things. I'm a smidgen on eternity right now. My life is just a little part of eternity. I want to have a happy, joyous, and free eternity, not just a happy, joyous, and free life.
There's such a bigger picture, and we definitely want to talk more about that. But today we're gonna conclude this episode, and I loved having you in studio, man. I love having you around. Speaking of around, if you want to meet Todd personally, come on down to the Recovery Chapel. We are here all the time. It's really kind of a happy, fun club. And there's some ways to support the Recovery Chapel and help us continue to work in other people's lives and to carry the message to those that still suffer from drugs and alcohol. This is a reality of our time. It is an epidemic of biblical proportion. And I don't hesitate to say that. It is worse than COVID. I'll say that louder. It is worse than cancer. Addiction has affected I don't know how many people in whether it be directly or a family member, a neighbor, a coworker. It is alive and well. It knows no economic standard. It knows no race. It knows no age group. And it's just getting worse. And so we need to be louder and stronger in our lives and in showing that the promises do come true if we're willing to do the work. Take an hour bus ride across town to meet with a sponsee for an hour, and then an hour bus ride back. No excuses. And
Whatever
what are we
it
saying?
takes.
Whatever it takes. To any lengths. What does that look like? Well, any lengths between the hours of... No, any lengths. Answer the phone, folks. Answer the phone. Hey, one way you can support the Recovery Chapel, and there's a couple different ways. Kendra's going to talk about those right now.
If you have a Venmo, you can find us on Venmo at the Recovery Chapel. The isn't there, so it's at Recovery Chapel on the Venmo. We have the GoFundMe account, and it is Recovery Chapel also. If you'd like to connect with us and like to follow us on social media, our Instagram is at the Recovery Chapel, and Facebook is going to be the Recovery Chapel Podcast. We would love to hear from you guys, whether you are in active recovery or not, if it pertains to your life, if you have loved ones or friends that maybe you want to talk to somebody or you want to shoot them in the right direction. We are here and available. Also, if you have any ideas or would like to connect and share your story, because your story saves lives, please feel free to send us a message, and we would love to hear from you.
Hey, we talked a little bit about family today. If you are a spouse of someone in recovery and you've seen the promises come true and that life has changed, your story matters. Your story will save lives. Kendra mentioned that a second ago. That is our mantra here at the Recovery Chapel, that all of our stories, no matter where you are on the spiritual spectrum, no matter where you are in sobriety, day 1 to day 101, we want to hear from you. We want to meet you because your story will save a life. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. I love all of you. Please reach out to us in one of those avenues on social media and or in person down here at the Recovery Chapel. We are open all the time. Don't mind the guy at the front door is going to take your temperature and put a face mask on you, but it's cool, man.
Just kidding.
Now, come on in and talk to us. Come on in and visit with us. There's meetings going on throughout the week as well, and you can check out what our meeting schedules are at www.therecoverychapel.com. Again, I love you so much, and I appreciate each and every one of you. God bless you, and may the Lord keep you, and another day sober is another day alive.